as the UNGA summit is continuing in New York. By the way, this is the 79th UNGA summit in New York, and many heads of states are there to discuss about global issues and what is affecting the world as we stand today. One proposal has hit headlines, and that is the fact that there is a solid proposal to add the number of permanent members at the United Nations Security Council. And one of the proposed regions is Africa. Currently, Africa is not represented at the UNSC. We have France, the UK, we have Russia, the US, and we have China as 5 core or permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. Now, Africa contributes a lot of men and women to serve at the UN missions. And by the way, many UN missions are here in Africa, but Africa is not represented. Africa is always represented at the non-permanent members. These are the members who join and then leave at some point. We have 3 representatives at a given time from Africa to serve at the UNSC, but as non-permanent members. Of course, we have different laws between permanent and non-permanent members. But this proposal to have Africa represented at the UNSC is coming at a time when there are a lot of interest as well, because countries like Japan, Germany, and Brazil also want to be represented at the UNSC. They have their case, and they're saying that a country like India has over 1 billion people who are left out of the critical decision-making body, such as the UNSC. We know that the 5 members have that special power called veto power, that if one member does not agree to something, then that thing does not pass. That is the veto power. And if you want to understand well, you have to go back to understand when the UNSC was formed. And this was formed just after World War II. And this was the period where every nation was fighting one common enemy, and that was Hitler. So Germany was left out, and any ally of Germany that was around at that time was left out, not to be part of the United Nations Security Council. So Russia, the US, the UK, France, and China became part of the United Nations Security Council. And these 80 years on have been the only members represented at the United Nations Security Council. They have, as I said, they have the veto power, and they discuss about critical issues that happen across the world, including critical wars that are happening, like the war in Gaza. They have a very major say about what is going on in the war in Gaza. They have a major say in what is going on in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine. They have a major say of what is going on in Africa. Now, if you're looking at all these countries, these 5 countries that are represented there, we don't have an African representation at the UNSC. And that is a very big problem. That means that African matters are not being discussed honestly at the United Nations top body. The UNSC, by the way, is the top body of the United Nations. These 5 countries determine what happens across the world. If there is a particular conflict, these 5 countries are the major determinants or if something or an action is going to be taken or not, because they have the veto power. The non-permanent members will be there, but they won't have the veto power. Now, because these 5 countries, it is automatic that they don't want to give their powers away. They're proposing that there should be additional members in the permanent members, but these additional members should not have the veto power. Now, that brings up a 2-tiered system that is just as discriminatory as we are right now. We cannot have a 2-tier system that has members that can veto and other members that cannot veto. That will not be, in essence, that will not change the situation as we are right now, where we have only 5 members that can veto, and then we have non-permanent members. So countries like India, Brazil, countries like Germany have their petitions to also join the UNSC, and they are supported. Africa is supported by the United States. Africa is also supported by China and Russia to join the UNSC. But where they differ is whether these additional countries will have the power to veto or not, because there has been drama at the UNSC quite frequently when there is a conflict in any part of the world. When there was the Russian-Ukraine conflict, there was China could most of the time side with Russia and veto or abstain from a particular vote, and that meant that decisions could not be passed, more so when one country is implicated. And we're living in a sort of a dichotomy world where we have the West and the East, and every issue is being looked at in terms of the West and the East. So whenever you have a conflict like the Gaza, Ukraine, you'll find that the Western allies will align, and then we'll have the Eastern allies to align on their own. So there are differences when it comes to how the UNSC vote, and that is the sole factor that makes them to be skeptic about releasing their power to another party to join in and also be able to veto, because they are looking at influence. If you have Africa on the table, then where is Africa going to lie when you have a war like Russia and Ukraine? Is Africa going to vote against Russia? Is Africa going to vote for Ukraine? If you're speaking about Israel and Gaza, where is Africa going to vote? So these are the challenges that are coming into play among these 5 countries. And for a matter of fact, to have any additional country at the UNSC, all 5 countries have to agree. They have to agree on this particular country that it can be a member of part of the permanent membership of the UNSC. And that is also something that they are gambling whether, yes, they can come out and support boldly and say that Africa should join. But what happens behind the curtains is all these 5 countries actually do not want any additional country to join the UNSC. But it is time for additional countries to be part of the United Nations Security Council, because honestly, they've done a bad job, because currently the world is in different wars at the same time. And the UNSC, or the UN particularly, was supposed to be there to stop any wars from getting to the extent of Ukraine, Russia, or of Gaza and Israel. So if they have failed in one of their only sole job to maintain peace in the world, then there is a need for change. And Africa deserves to be part of the table. We have an entire continent that is not represented at the UNSC. That extends to the discrimination that is facing Africa at this very time, because now we are seeing different countries trying to accommodate Africa. But the gist is, let us not just be accommodated because we want to be part of the UNSC. Let us be accommodated and be part and parcel, and also actively participate and be given the realms of power similar to what others are having at the UNSC, so that we can be able to give our principles accordingly as the African states, and be also participating in the UNSC, the decision-making body. Because if we get to that point, then we'll say that Africa is part of the global world.